Hello everybody and good morning. Welcome to the Supercharging Your Unit Testing webinar. My name is Igal. I'm a developer here at Typemock, and today I'm going to talk to you about your unit tests. For the agenda today, we're going to be writing unit tests for existing code. I'm going to show you some of the coolest features of Typemock Isolator and explain to you how those will allow us to solve problems which typically occur when writing unit tests. After that, we're going to have a Q&A session in which I will answer any and all of your questions which you might have. Please also feel free to ask me any questions during this webinar, and I will try to answer them the best I can. For the demo code, we are going to be working on an application. And we're going to be looking at how can we test a part of some logic, how can we test the new stuff, new meaning instantiations of new objects, which can be basically anything, any dependency at all inside our code which we are testing. We're going to be showing how can we set up fields in order to, if your code requires some fields to be set in a certain way, and we're going to be showing how we can invoke private methods using reflection and using some APIs Isolator provides for this. So when I prepared the demo for this talk, I wanted to select an application which I could be comfortable showing, but something that could also be interesting to many people, which would not talk to a specific domain, like talking to a database or reading some files from a disk. I selected an open source application called Image Resizer. You can download this from Codeplex. Basically, Image Resizer is a utility which replaces a Microsoft Image Resizer Power Toy for Windows XP, whoever remembers it. Basically, it allows you to right-click and resize images from your Windows Explorer. It's a nice utility, and its code is fairly simple for our purposes, and this is the reason I chose this application. So right now you are seeing my Visual Studio screen, and here's the project which I've downloaded from the internet. It's a fairly well-written application. It's a WPF application. It uses some native C++ code to interact with the Windows Explorer. We're not going to be looking at that. In fact, we're not going to be looking at the core application itself. We are going to be looking at one part of this project called the updater service. The updater service, from what it looks like, it's responsible for updating the application if a new version is available on the internet. I chose this particular class because it's something that is not bound to a specific domain, so it should be understandable pretty much to everybody. And also, this has nothing to do with any particular parts of Image Resizer itself. It is fairly well written. This project does not have any unit tests, but this is something that we will write. And from looking at this code, I can see that this class it starts a background worker, which is something that allows threads. It allows to run some part of the operation on another thread, so it does not block the UI. And it seems that this background worker calls this method, which is called check for updates. Check for updates is a method which, amongst other things, it tries to read an XML from a URL, then parse this XML using this Atom10 feed formatter. This is some sort of standard format for RSS feeds, or Atom feeds rather. So it tries to read it, and in case it has some sort of formatting exception, it simply returns. And it looks like there's another piece of logic here which parses the items and checks if there's a new version available on the internet. So we are going to write tests for this class, specifically for the check for updates method. Now there are several things to note here in this project. First of all, this class is internal, meaning that it will not be visible to our tests without changing the project itself and adding an attribute called internals visible to. This attribute is required for us to see this internal class. So let's begin. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a new project, which is going to be a test project. It is located under Visual C#, test categories. It's a test project. This project is based on MS Test, which is a Visual Studio test runner. And you can use just about anything. You can use NUnit or XUnit or whatever other test runners and testing frameworks you are familiar with. We're going to be using MS Test because it's available. It comes within Visual Studio, and there's nothing additional to add. So I'm going to name my test image Resizer tests. This is some sort of convention, Resizer tests, like this. And some sort of convention of appending the word tests to to the name of your project. And for other convenience, I can create a solution folder which I will call tests, and just drag this project in there, so it will not clutter our main source tree. So by default, I have been given this unit test 1 class. I don't need it right now, so I'm going to simply delete it. Before we can start working writing unit tests, I will have to add references to Typemock Isolator to our test project. So in order to do this, I am going to need to click on references, add reference. I need to add reference to several things. First of all, to our image Resizer project. This is our project which we are testing, so I need to add this reference to the tests. Another thing I need to add, is two DLLs, two Typemock DLLs, which are responsible for basically running the tests using Isolator. So while we're waiting for this dialog to be populated, we are looking for the following two APIs. One of them is called Typemock Isolator C# API, and the other one is called Typemock Isolator Core DLL. If you're looking to manually add those, they are called typemock.arrangeActAssert and typemock.dll. So when we click OK, both those DLLs are added to our project. I want you to notice that we are using .NET 4 right now, and Typemock Isolator supports everything from .NET 2 to .NET 4 with all the cool and new stuff like lambdas built into the product. All right, so we are ready to begin. We're almost ready to begin, rather. All that's left to do is add the visibility to our test project to this assembly info file. So we can do this by typing assembly internals visible to, and I need to press Control dot to bring up the add usings dialog, and I need to give it the name of our test project. So it's image Resizer .tests. We're not using any strong naming here, so this is it, so only by name. And now I am able, inside my test project, I am now able to see every internal class of image Resizer. So I am going to create a new test, a new class rather. I'm going to name it, it's going to be a simple class. I'm going to name it updater service tests, because this is what we are going to be testing. We are going to be testing the updater service, which is right here, to remind you. We're going to be looking at it closely really soon. Before we can do that, let's prepare our test class to be a unit test. So I'm going to write public class, and I'm going to decorate this with the test class attribute, which is the attribute for mstest. Again, I pressed Control dot, and it added the using reference automatically. Now I'm going to create a unit test method. The naming convention I'm using looks like this. So I'm going to write public void, which is the signature for the test method. The test method, usually I name them in the following way. First thing I'm going to write is the method which is under test, is the thing I am testing. Because the class is named updater service test, it's obvious that I'm testing the update service. Now the first part of the name of the test is going to be the method which I'm testing, which is check for updates. So I'm going to write check for updates. Now the second part of the test name is what is the scenario? What is the scenario I'm testing? So the scenario I am testing is what happens when there is a new version available, and it's it doesn't matter how it comes to this, how it makes it so the new version is available. We are just simply assuming that this is the scenario. A new version is available, which means available on the internet and whatnot. And the third part of the test method is what is basically the expected result. If we look at the updater service class, and again, skipping all the details which are right now not important, it seems that if it finds an item which matches some sort of check for a new version, it passes this item to onUpdateAvailable, and onUpdateAvailable method just raises the updateAvailable event. So what our test would what I'd like to test here is that the update available event was raised. So simply the result is raises update available event. So this is the test name which I've chosen. This is descriptive, and pretty sure after 2 months I'm going to be able to remember what this test checks for. And now that we have this test name ready, all I need to do is just add the test method attribute. Again, this is the attribute for mstest. And one last thing, which is fairly important and many people forget to do, I need to add the isolated attribute. Isolated attribute is required for Typemock because it takes care of any cleanup of any dependencies which are left between the tests. And this, well, this is not required. It's very much recommended, so it does not clutter and cause any problems during runtime. All right, so we are ready to begin. And before we begin, we need to familiarize ourselves with this code a little bit. Typically, when writing unit tests, you will be writing unit tests for a code you are familiar with. And I've downloaded this project just a few hours ago, trying to find some good demo code. And from what I can see about this class is that its constructor, it takes in a settings class as a dependency. After this, it starts a background worker component to run this method in a background thread. Also, it has some stuff to do with raising events and some dispose logic. And finally, we have this check for updates method, which is basically the core logic of this class. So from what we can see is that well, it does a bunch of stuff. So what I'd like to do right now is talk to you about, and again, this class only implements iDisposable, so it doesn't have any interface and something we could either, I don't know, extract. If if this is our code and we want to test it, there are some things that are wrong here, to say, that can affect our testability or rather slow us down. For instance, some work here is done on the background thread. Now, threading and testing, it's a tricky business because while it is possible, it's really tricky. Usually what we would like to do is we'd like to test the logic and not any other threading issues would happen. Ideally, I would like to be able to call this method on its own without any other stuff that happens in the meantime. So what I would like to do is to be able to create this updater service instant, but somehow without background worker initializing and firing. So with Isolator, there are several things which we can do. With Isolator, for instance, I hope some of you, or rather all of you, know how to create a fake instance. If you're not familiar with the Isolator API, Isolator API in its entirety begins with the isolate keyword. This is the entry point to all of our APIs. We call it the single point of entry. And here you can find everything that you are looking for. So in this case, I want to create a fake instance of the updater service class. Updater service. And I need to create control dot again to add the reference. Now, typically, typically this thing creates an instance, a fake instance. We are using the term fake instead of mock or stub to avoid confusion. Basically, a fake instance is an instance that looks and acts the same as any other object, only in this case what I did was create what is called a recursive fake. By default, isolate fake instance creates a recursive fake, meaning every method and every property on this class right now does nothing. It does not throw any exceptions, but all its primitive values returning defaults, like for example ints return zeros and strings are empty instead of null, and all the methods are returning recursive fakes themselves. But this is not really what I want, because I want to be able to still call the original implementation of those methods. Only thing I care about is not executing the constructor, so that allowing the background worker to be initialized. So there's an overload which I can use for the fake instance method, something that is called one of the overloads allows you to specify how the members of the class will behave. So one of the overloads provides a members enum in which you can specify the behavior of the class members. So returns recursive fakes. This is the default. It's like I said. It's it's allowing the fake to return non-null values and just be an empty shell of an object. Returns nulls does the complete opposite. It forces every call to return a null. So if you want to be able to specify values other than null, you have to do so explicitly. Must specify return values is what is also known as a strict mode. Basically, for every call that you are doing against your fake object, you must explicitly specify it with the rest of the Isolator APIs. Otherwise, you'll get an exception. And this is called the strict mode, and it's useful sometimes when you want to make sure that only things that were supposed to explicitly happen happened. And call original is what we are interested in. Call original basically, like it says, it calls the original implementations of the methods. So basically the object is still fake, but all of its methods are being called regularly and without any problems. So besides call original, there's another overload which basically I am interested in. It's called constructor will be, and there are two options. It will be either called or ignored. For calling the constructor, so this is to say we are creating a regular object with its constructor executed, and I'm not interested in that, so I'm going to ignore the constructor. So the object will be created, but its constructor will not be executed. This creates an updater service instance which should work, which should call its original methods, and without its having to execute the constructor. Now, I would like to be able to check, if I look at the service instance, I can see that it has the update available service, so update available event. So basically my assertion should be that this event had fired. In order to check this, I can simply declare a Boolean value, and I can call it was event fired. I have a question here from Brian, who asks if I had to specify the constructor will be argument. If I had to specify it explicitly, if it's implicitly, I'm sorry. If I had to specify it explicitly or not. Well, basically, if you're creating a call original fake with just members call original, your object will behave completely 100% originally, meaning your constructor will be called. If you're using any other type of fake, like a recursive or anything else, your constructor will not be called unless you explicitly tell it to. So this is the only two options in which you are explicitly controlling the constructor or not. So meaning by default, most of the times your constructor will not be called when you create a fake object. So I'm continuing with was event fired. I'm going to initialize it to false, and I'm simply going to subscribe to this event. I don't care about args, so I'm going to just write delegate. And what I'd like to happen when this event had fired is that was event fired was set to true. And my assert should be assert is true, was event fired. So this is my test. This is what I want. I want to be able to assert that the event had fired. Let's try running this test and see what happens. So I'm going to run this using Control-RT, which is the shortcut for running MS tests. And right now, well, it's running. It's in progress, and it's failed. It is now failed because well, obviously it failed because nothing causes this event to be fired. I forgot one crucial thing. I forgot the act part. The AAA is basically arranged, act, and assert. So in arrange, I arrange all my expectations of what I want to happen. Act is the act part where I execute the code that I'm testing, and assert is the third part where I verify the result. I did forget the act part in which I call the method which is called check for updates. Now check for updates is a private method, so we can either call it with reflection or we can call it, there's a convenient API in Isolator which is called isolate.invoke.method, and this is also useful to invoke events, but we're not invoking events right now. We're checking if it was fired, but I am invoking a method. So this takes in an object which is on which object we're running. So we're invoking on a service object. The method name is check for updates. And by the way, this invokes the overload. You can specify parameters, but it looks for the first overload it can find. So this is it. This thing, isolate invoke method, is what allows us to invoke private methods inside the class, which we are testing. So now if I run this test, let's see what happens. So I can see that right now it threw exception. And I can look at that. I can see that a null reference exception was thrown, and I even have a line number. And if I jump to the line, I can see that it was thrown because it's trying to access this settings update URL, and obviously settings is null because when I created a fake object, I ignored completely the constructor parameters, and I didn't pass the settings argument into this class. I could have, there's another overload in fake instance which allows you to specify a method, a constructor argument, and it's one of the ways to do this. Another way to do this, it's since the settings is a field and not a property, we'll not be able to use it's a private field rather. We are going to have to set it manually by using another API of Isolator, which is called object state. Before I can do that, I need to create, because I don't care about the settings class, I don't care where it comes from, I'm just going to simply create a fake instance of it. So I'm going to call it settings, and again, control dot, I'm going to name it fake settings, and I'm going to say isolate, create, isolate fake instance of settings. What I need to do now is I need to be able to set this as a field onto our service. So I'm going to use a helper class called object state, which again I have to invoke using control, not object state, control dot. And object state has two methods called getField and setField. I'm going to use setField in order to set the field of settings onto this onto the service class. So the object is service, the field name is settings, and the value is our fake settings which we just created. So this causes a fake settings object to be set as a field onto our service class, which is under test. I'm continuing to running our tests, see what effect had it on the test run. So I can see it still throws an exception, but this time it's a different exception. This time it's the string was not recognized as a valid URI. I'm going to jump to this line, and I see that it tries to create an XML reader from the URL which was extracted from settings, but since it's a recursive fake, so the URL is an empty string. And since this thing tries to catch only web exceptions, and what was thrown was argument exception, so this test doesn't catch it. This try catch doesn't catch it. And I'm going to stop for a second because there are some people who are asking me about if using fields and using reflection in tests does not make it more brittle or more fragile, or even if it's a good practice. When you're dealing, my answer to this is, well, two things. First of all, please try to remember that this is a demo. I'm trying to show you how can I solve problems using the isolator. I may not have necessarily done this. If I had more time to think it over, I might have changed the design a little bit. However, there are situations where, unfortunately, you are not able to change at all the code under test because the management won't allow it, or whatever other reason. But still, you have to maintain. You want to be able to test it, and you have to access the internal sometimes. So yes, things like reflection and private methods should not be often tested because they are not obviously strongly typed. And if I rename the check for updates method, most of my tests are going to break because there are no tools smart enough to realize that this string called check for updates refers to this method. But again, I am trying to show what's possible to do with Isolator in maybe not ideal conditions. And hopefully you can understand that. So to come back to our problem, it seems that I am trying to create a XML reader out of an empty URL, and this causes an exception. So again, there are a few things I can do here. I can either create a fake XML reader and just specify it instead of this XML reader. An XML reader is an abstract class, so I can just create any fake, which won't do anything at all. Right now, it seems to me that I really don't care about this XML reader create method because, well, I don't really trying to read an XML. I'm trying to make it think that I have a valid feed. So I could tell Isolator and since the create is a static method on XML reader, I could simply fake this method using isolate.fake.static methods of type XML reader. And I need to add, if I was using ReSharper, for example, this would add the reference automatically, but I don't, and I have to manually add a reference to system.xml. Sorry. Okay, let's try this again. System.xml. All right. So now I'm able to press Control dot and add the reference. So what this line does is it fakes all the, it does not return anything. It fakes all the static methods which exist on the XML reader class, and instead of them returns, basically it does nothing. It causes the method not to do anything, which is something I currently want because I don't care about any of the XML reader logic, and this is one of the ways to do it. So I am creating, I've just faked all the static methods on XML reader, and let's continue. Let's see what happens next. So right now it seems that I don't have any more crashes, but I still have a failing test because this was never fired, and therefore this was never set to true. Okay, let's have a look at what's going on in the code. Why wasn't this fired? So after I have this reader or whatever, I am instantiating a feed formatter, which is also a class located in system.service model. Comes in with the .NET framework. I am reading a feed from this reader into it, and then it looks like I am. Then it looks like there's a link query, fairly complex, which is selects all items where their title is the version number and their categories contain something which is parsable to this enum, which is called release status. And if I have a look at it, it's something that's either stable, beta, or alpha. All right, this might be useful. So let's see how I can, so let's see what can I do here to fake this information. Again, remember, what I'm interested is to having this method think that it found a valid version, it found a new version available. In order for it to do that, it needs to, this where query is supposed to return one item. I'm sorry, this where query is supposed to return a list where a first item is not null. And only then it will call an update available. Depending on the thing we are testing, right now I am testing only this, only the fact that I want to be able to see when the event is fired. So I can do several things here. One of those is that I want to be able to fake this. I want to be able to fake this Atom feed formatter and have its items return whatever items I tell it to. I don't have to really fake it because I create a live object. But again, faking it creates a recursive fake which has less side effects, which means it does not call any other code which I don't care about. So I can simply say var a fake formatter, or rather give it a better name. It's not just formatter. All right. So I can say isolate a fake instance of this. And I think I need to add, what's the namespace? It's a system service model. I need to add this as a reference to our tests as well. All right, system.service model, and there are several. I believe this is the one. And let's say control dot. Yes, this is in syndication. So I created this. I could just as easily have created a live object, just say new Atom 10 feed formatter. But this is easier, I believe. What I want to do now is I want to, I could specify, there are a few things I could have done here. I could create a fake items collection, or rather another fake, just an items collection, and return it, and to fill the item and the title with the text which I care about, and let this logic to do its stuff. But right now I'm only interested in the flow. I'm only interested in the event firing, and not really something that checks if the XML was in the correct format. So I can do something like this. I can just completely fake the link query. This where is an extension method, which is basically a static method. I could just simply go ahead and say like isolate when called, which this is a very important API which sets behaviors. So with when called, I am able to specify a lambda to whatever property or method I want, and we will see how it can affect the behavior. So I can say when called, fake formatter dot feed dot items dot where, because it's an extension method, and by default when called ignores arguments to those methods. So I can just put anything here because it's a func, because it's a delegate. I cannot use null. I would typically put null here because I don't care about the argument right now. But since it's not null, I'm just going to write like an empty, meaningless expression, something that returns false from what I can just think. So when items.where is called, I want to be able will return, which instructs Isolator to return something when this thing is called. And this is strongly typed, so it expects an IEnumerable of syndication item. But basically what items is. Items is an IEnumerable of syndication items. So I can just return any new list of syndication item with just one item in it. So any new syndication item, and I'm closing this, and that's it. Basically, I've just instructed Isolator to return. So when the where query is called, without it being without the importance of what the query is, I just instructed Isolator to say when the where query is being called on those items, just return an empty list with one item in it. And now, after I've done it, there's one more thing missing. I've did it on the fake formatter. I need to somehow replace this new formatter with my fake one. So Isolator again has an API for this. It's called the swap API. So I can instruct Isolator isolate.swap. Just one second. Oh, yeah. So I can say isolate.swap.text next instance. There's next instance and all instances. This allows you to replace any future, it's called a future object, any future instantiation of any object with a fake one. So right now I'm swapping the next instance of this Atom10 feed formatter with our fake formatter. So this will, when this formatter at runtime will be instantiated, it will be replaced with our fake formatter. And our fake formatter is of course already configured with returning one new item. I have a question here that's asking, would not be better to fake first or default call too? I could do that. In fact, I could fake the entire chain if I wanted to. But first or default is fairly simple. It just takes in a list, and if it has an item in it, it returns it. If it doesn't, it returns a default value, which is a null. So from my point of view, I would let first or default do its job, and I would simply replace the predicate in where. So the entire logic that's happening in where, this is what I'm faking here. If I were to refactor this code a little bit, I would extract maybe this filtering logic into another place and fake that. So instead of just messing with link queries, I would just fake this part of the logic, or not fake, or just check just that part of the logic. My future tests for this code, I mean, this code just checks end-to-end the entire flow. I mean, what happens when this auto-update service receives a valid XML from the net? It should fire the event. My next test would be checking that the parsing itself, saying that this XML had a higher version, but wrong. There was another condition, like the categories, whatever. I would continue and feed this method my test data, and it wouldn't be necessarily with Isolator. I could have just easily created a string, an XML string, which I would place in my tests and feed it to the reader, so I wouldn't have to fake it. But again, this is just some of the things you can do when creating your unit test. Your goal is to test all the cases which you think might happen. So what happens when you don't have any internet connection? What happens when you get a malformed XML? Stuff like that. With Isolator, it's just easier to isolate basically some of those dependencies without having to work really hard on extracting them and placing them behind interfacing and injecting them into a class. With legacy code, this is not necessarily the best thing to do, but when you don't have a choice really, this is the second best thing. So to get back to our test, which is fairly complex right now, but it should work. If I run it right now, let's see what happens. So if I run it right now, I can see that it passed. Basically, what happened was our event fired. This boolean was set to true, and my test did pass. I can also, if I really wanted to, I can just set a breakpoint. Let's just set a breakpoint here and see what happens in runtime. So I can debug this test. And when I am running it right now, I am well, everything's being loaded. But right now, I am all right. I am inside this method, and I can just simply see with the watch with the data tips that this settings is now. This is a fake settings class. All of its quality level, whatever those are simply default values. So this is a boolean. Its default value is false. And by stepping in, I can see that it reads a version from the assembly, which is okay. I didn't really want to fake that. Our XML reader.create with an empty string does nothing. because well, this call was ignored. Our formatter was currently, well, sometimes it doesn't work to view the data in the watch, but our formatter was swapped with a fake formatter from our test. So now it had read something from a null. This would throw an exception in a real scenario, and I can simply see that I can continue to execute the code, and right now my item is a syndication item. It's fairly empty, but this test doesn't care about its being filled with correct data. Right now it's an empty syndication item, and since it's not null, it causes the onUpdate available event to be invoked, and this is what causes our test to pass. So that's about it. That's about it for this method. And just to go over this again, I wanted to show you a few of the Isolator APIs, so you can remember what I did here. And again, this webinar will be posted online pretty soon, and you will be able to watch it. And again, a Q&A session is coming up. If you have any questions to me about any of this, you are more than welcome to contact me via my email, which will be shown later again. I would really appreciate any feedback because, frankly, this is the first time I am doing a webinar. I would like to hear your thoughts about it. So just to remind you, we're creating a fake class service, which is our class under test. I am creating a fake of it with call original, with members call original, so that every method of this class continues to execute. What will not be executed is the constructor. So anything, any and all initializations that happen in the constructor will be ignored. And again, I did this to skip the initialization of the background thread. It's important to notice that if you're doing this in your code and you're skipping the constructor, it is important to make sure all the fields which are being used, which are not properties, that they have a value. And this is what happened here, because somewhere in the code we were using a settings field, and it was null because the constructor didn't fire. So I created a fake settings using the isolate fake API, and I used the object state helper, object state class, to set the field to our fake field. Next thing I did is I caused the static methods on XML reader to do nothing, because for this test I didn't care about any logic that was happening in the static fields. Think about it: if you have like utilities which you don't necessarily need to execute during the test, you can simply ignore them by saying isolate fake static methods and give it a type. And if it doesn't work because it's a static class, because XML reader is an abstract class, so there's also a non-generic overload in which you can give it a type of any kind. The next thing was pretty straightforward. I subscribed to the event and just set the boolean to be true in case it happened. Next thing I did, I created a fake instance of a formatter. I set some expectation on it using the when called API, and I used a chain of things without caring if they were initialized or not, because by default they are. So fake formatter.feed.items is not null in this case, and where is another extension method. So I just faked an entire chain of calls with a simple with one single line. And what I said, that when it is called, just return a new list. There are other things that I can do with the when called API, like will throw if you need to simulate throwing exception. or do instead. Do instead is a very powerful API where you can specify your own implementation of the method you are faking. So if I wanted the where to behave differently, I could have done this in this test using do instead. So this is just something to remember when you are writing your unit test. Last thing I did was, since I created a fake formatter, now I had to instruct the runtime to replace the next instance of this formatter with my fake one. So I did this with isolate.swap.nextInstance API. It takes a type, and you can replace it with either any fake object which you created, or live for that matter. I could have simply as easily written a new Atom feed formatter, because Isolator works on both fake and live objects as well. Let's try to run this, see what happens. Oh, it failed. Well, there are probably some side effects that were happening, which I didn't check. So right now let's use the fake one. So I instructed Isolator to replace the next instance of this feed formatter with my fake one. You can use this to, for example, if you have like any maybe link to SQL or entity framework code in which you want to replace the data context object, you can do this with this. You can create a fake data context object and just simply swap it in runtime using this API. So this is one of those uses. Last thing really I did was to invoke the private method of the service class, which was called check for update, and I did it using the isolate.invoke API, which is a handy little utility to invoke either methods or events. And this is it. This is 90% of Isolator APIs, which allows you to do just about anything. So right now I am switching to this PowerPoint presentation, which is supposed to show, not this one, which is supposed to show the Q&A slide. And if you have any questions which you'd like to ask me, please do so now. Or if you'd like to ask those in a more formal way, I would really appreciate it if you could email me to igal, it's IGAL, @typemock.com. And one last thing which is important, which I wanted to tell you, is that, is that we have a drawing of a free Isolator license and the Legalize unit testing t-shirts for you. And if you enjoyed this webinar, please answer those questions. Write them to avi@typemock.com, and you will be put in a draw for, maybe you can win an Isolator license or a cool t-shirt. Just answer a few of those questions and you'll be all set. I have a question here, which is invoke a method only used to call private methods? It is. It's also useful when calling static methods on a class. Maybe if you only have a type, if you only have a type or maybe an instance where you cannot necessarily see the type name in IntelliSense, you can use this. Basically, it's a wrapper for a reflection. Instead of just doing everything with method info and calling those complicated APIs, we just wrap that for you. But basically, yes, it's a reflection. It's a reflection thing. And I also have another question: if the PowerPoint slides will be online. Of course they will. And I have another question: if we have tools for unit testing on Android. Not right now, because as far as I personally know, Android is Java based, and our tools work currently with, we have Isolator for .NET, which is typically C# and VB. We also have an Isolator product for native C++. So if you're doing any C++ work, please look into that, because it allows you to do almost everything Typemock Isolator does in terms of faking live objects or just swapping out memories. You can do that. This video will be placed online in our website at typemock.com. There is a section called Learn at the top, and under there it says Webinars, so it will be placed there. Shortly. Isolator on Windows Phone 7 should work. We have Windows Phone 7 basically is two. Again, as far as I know, Windows Phone 7 supports two development platforms. It's XNA, which is the regular well, it's an XNA runtime, but it's a regular .NET compiler, as far as I know. Again, I might be mistaken. And it's a Silverlight development. So for Silverlight, we do support Silverlight in terms of we can fake Silverlight classes using something that is called Silver Unit, which is a unit testing framework for Silverlight, which is actually it's open source. It's based on our Typemock API, but the framework for testing Silverlight is open source. It is available at silverunit.codeplex.com. It was sorry, Silver Unit. Yeah, it's a part of See-Through, which is our AOP framework. But as a part of See-Through comes Silver Unit, which is an entire framework to run unit tests for Silverlight based on Isolator. So I suggest you go there at seethrough.codeplex.com and give it a try. I am being told that we are out of time right now, so I want to thank you again for coming and staying. I really would like to hear your feedback. So again, please contact me on egal@typemock.com. My nickname is HMemCPY on Twitter. You're invited to follow. And that's it. Thank you very much.